Another week of college baseball brings more changes to the top 25 rankings. Hi everybody, I'm Wheels, and I'll be going through the new top 25 rankings posted by D1Baseball.com, which come out every Monday. The background video for this week is the full 9th inning of Clemson's 8-run comeback on Saturday against Florida State. At 25 is the Oklahoma Sooners, who dropped 7 spots after losing a home series to West Virginia. Kentucky enters the rankings at 24. They sit at 5-1 through 2 conference series and are in first place in the SEC East. They'll be on the road for a second straight week as they head to Oxford, Mississippi to face Ole Miss. Kansas State is back in the rankings as they re-enter at number 23. A 4-0 week that included a sweep of Houston has them at 5-1 in conference play with a 9-game winning streak overall. Another team re-entering the rankings is NC State, who comes in at number 22. They took 2 of 3 from Duke, who had previously been ranked in the top 10. All these new teams in the rankings means that someone had to drop out, and for this week those teams are TCU, Campbell, Auburn, and UC Santa Barbara. That's 4 teams who dropped out and only 3 new teams named so far, which means there's one more new entry who you'll hear about a little bit later. At 21 is Mississippi State. They lost 2 of 3 on the road against Texas A&M, but stay idle with so much movement behind them. UC Irvine had a perfect 3-0 week, which propels them up 4 spots into the top 20. Coastal Carolina dropped 6 spots after losing 2 of 3 at Appalachian State, which drops their conference record to 3-3. They're 1-3 in road games this year and now face a top 5 ranked Clemson team on the road Tuesday night. At 18 is South Carolina, who is another team that re-entered the rankings. They just dominated previously 3rd ranked Vanderbilt across a 3-game sweep, pushing them over 500 in conference play. I was a little surprised when they fell from the rankings last week, and this jump all the way to 18 shows that this is a really good team. We no longer have any undefeated teams as Florida State got swept at Clemson and falls 5 spots to 17. I know this was a tough week for the Seminoles, but I still feel pretty good about this team. They very easily could have won at least 2 out of 3 and held a lead of 4 or more runs in all 3 games. This just happened to be a series where the ball was flying and no lead was safe. They have a midweek rematch with Florida coming up before welcoming Louisville to town next weekend. Once again, Alabama comes in ranked 1 spot ahead of Florida State as they stay in the all-important top 16 despite getting swept at Georgia. A common trend across the SEC this year has been a lack of road series wins, as the home team has won 11 of 14 conference series. Alabama will host South Carolina in a top 20 ranked matchup this weekend. East Carolina dropped 5 spots after losing 2 out of 3 against UTSA, which was their first series loss of the season. North Carolina bounced back with a 4-0 week, which gives them a 7-2 conference record and a perfect 19-0 record in home games. Virginia Tech is the second of 4 consecutive ACC teams I'll mention, as they move up to 13 after going 4-0 as well. They're now 8-1 in conference play after sweeping Boston College. Wake Forest moves up 4 spots after winning their first conference series of the season. It was a better weekend for the Deacons, but they still let a late lead slip away in Game 3, which prevented them from moving above 500 in conference play. They host North Carolina in a fascinating top 15 ranked matchup that starts on Friday night. Most series start on Thursday this week to avoid playing on Easter Sunday, but everyone knows that Deacons still have to work on the holiest day of the year. Duke drops 2 spots to number 11 after losing a road series with NC State. I know Clemson got a lot of the attention for their big comeback wins over FSU, but NC State also raced a 5-run 9th inning deficit on Saturday. The Blue Devils will host Virginia this weekend, who is a team you'll hear about in just a bit, but first it's time for some series predictions. I went 6-4 in my 10 predictions from last weekend, which puts my season record at 11-7. You can see last week's predictions on screen, with the correct ones in green and the incorrect ones in red. For this week, I have Duke over Virginia, Texas A&M over Auburn, Miami with an upset over Clemson, Arkansas over LSU, Vanderbilt over Missouri, Alabama over South Carolina, Oregon State over USC, Wake Forest over North Carolina, Tennessee over Georgia, Florida over Mississippi State, and Kansas State over Texas. Okay, time for the top 10 teams in the country. Dallas Baptist has moved into the top 10 after a 3-1 week that included a midweek road win over ranked Oklahoma. They followed it up with a road series win over Sam Houston to open up conference play. For the season, they have a very impressive 6-2 record in games away from home to go along with an overall record of 19-4. Virginia moves up 5 spots to number 9. They're now 6-3 in ACC games after sweeping Pittsburgh, and their pitching looked a lot better in those 3 games. Still, I want to see if their staff can hold down a ranked opponent, and they'll have a chance to do that this this weekend against Duke. This is a big test for both teams, and one of them is going to have to lose. I give the edge to Duke since they're at home, but this series can go either way. It's a rematch from last year's Super Regionals, when the Hoos recovered from a Game 1 loss to win 2 straight and advance to Omaha. This will be a fun one to watch. LSU drops 3 spots to number 8 after losing a second consecutive conference series. This really felt like one the Tigers had to win. They got the win on Friday night and looked to be in line to clinch the series on Saturday, but a clutch hit with 2 outs in the 9th sent the game to extras, and from that point on, everybody knew you could bet on Jack Toney taking control of the rest of the series. He hit a game-winning home run in extras to win Game 2, and dominated the Tigers lineup in the rubber match, while going deep again in the run rule win. LSU now sits at 2-4 in the conference, and their next 3 series are all against top 10 opponents, as they face Arkansas on the road, Vandy at home, and Tennessee on the road. This feels like it's a 3-week stretch that's going to make or break their season. You absolutely cannot go 2-7 or 3-6 in these 9 games. If you're sitting there with only 4 or 5 wins in conference play through half of your series, you have to worry about the possibility of missing the NCAA tournament altogether. I'll be honest, I'm starting to get a little concerned about this team. You gotta start winning series at some point, and it's tough to do that when you're scoring just 5 runs a game in conference play and have been run ruled in both Sunday conference rubber matches. It's time for the Tigers to show me that they're not going to be a repeat of what we saw from Ole Miss last year, because there's a lot of similarities between those teams. Both were defending national champions, both went 3-0 at a neutral site non-conference tournament, and both entered conference play with a top 3 national ranking. Ole Miss ended up going 6-24 in conference play last year and didn't qualify for the SEC tournament. I don't see LSU getting to that point, but I am worried that at some point the conversation surrounding them will be less about their hosting resume and more about whether they're a 2 seed or a 3 seed going into the tournament in June. Figuring out a way to win a series over top-ranked Arkansas would quiet a lot of the concerns surrounding LSU right now. Vanderbilt drops down to 7th after getting swept at South Carolina. In last week's video, I had predicted South Carolina to win that series, which was probably my most controversial pick of the week. Despite the rough weekend, my feelings about this team have not changed. Baseball is a marathon, not a sprint, and there's going to be ups and downs along the way. They have an opportunity to bounce back this week at home against a 1-5 Missouri team in conference play, which gives them a chance to get right back to being 3 games over 500 in SEC games before entering a 3-series stretch of top 10 opponents, as they'll be facing LSU and Texas A&M on the road, followed by Florida at home. It'll be interesting to see how they respond to adversity, because there's nothing fun about getting swept right after going on a 14-game winning streak. I trust that Coach Corbin will have his team ready for the challenge. I could honestly spend an hour talking about the Florida Gators. It's just odd to see a team continue to struggle in midweeks, but then be perfectly fine over the weekend, even against top 10 opponents. A 14-9 record doesn't scream out top 10 team in the country, but when you factor in that they have the 3rd toughest strength of schedule, are 18th in RPI, and still haven't lost a 3-game series, it seems more justified. I mean, let's quickly recap their season. They entered ranked number 2, and dropped to 4 after opening weekend when they lost 1 game to St. John's and had the other 2 get canceled due to weather. They went 5-0 the following week and stayed ranked 4th. In week 3, they split their 2 midweeks and won a road series over Miami, which kept them at 4. They went 2-2 in the final week before conference play, as UCF beat them in a midweek, but they still won their weekend series. Even then, they dropped 2 spots to 6th. They had another 2-2 week after that, as Florida State took them down in a midweek, but they responded by winning 2 out of 3 from Texas A&M, who at the time was still undefeated and ranked 4th. Their ranking didn't change after that, and it shouldn't have. There's no way you can move down after winning a series over a top 5 team. Same story in the most recent week. A midweek loss at home, and then a series win, this time on the road over number 5 ranked LSU. You're not going to drop in the rankings after that. Honestly, if anything, I think they should have moved up a couple spots. At this point in time, they're ranked behind Tennessee, who has a worse conference record, and Texas A&M, who they just won a series against last weekend. The midweek losses aren't great, but if you can keep winning your weekend series against really good opponents, you don't deserve to fall in the rankings. I've kind of given these next 2 rankings away already, but Tennessee is at 5 and Texas A&M is at 4. The Vols are coming off a series win over Ole Miss, though they did suffer their first home loss of the season, as the Rebs pulled off a 9th-inning comeback in Game 2. Similar story for Texas A&M, as they won 2 of 3 over Mississippi State, but also suffered their first home loss of the season. These 2 teams cap off a stretch of 5 consecutive SEC teams ranked 4th through 8th. Clemson moves up a spot to number 3 after sweeping Florida State to cap off a 5-0 week. They have definitely established themselves as a title contender if they hadn't already. So, naturally, that means I'm going to pick against them in their series this weekend. I made that decision less about Clemson losing the series and more because Miami has already won their previous 2 home series against top 15 ACC opponents. Hopefully it won't be too hot in Miami, so we can see Cookie Monster sitting behind home plate for all 3 games. Oregon State had another perfect 4-0 week, and they stayed ranked 2nd in the nation. The way things are looking looking in the Pac-12 this year, combined with all of the talent and firepower on their team, don't be surprised if the Beavers stay in the top 5 for the rest of the season. Arkansas stays in the number 1 spot, and their pitching staff continues to dominate opposing lineups. Their own lineup may still have a few questions to be asked, though. After scoring 23 runs in their first conference series against Missouri, they scored just 13 across their 3 games at Auburn, though obviously they were still able to win 2 of them. Things get a little tougher this week as they welcome the LSU Tigers to town, so it'll be interesting to see how they do against the top 10 conference opponent. Overall, we have another great week of matchups to look forward to, and I'm excited to bring you continued coverage of all the action. Thank you for watching another rankings video, and for all who celebrate, have a happy Easter.